Right, if you haven't found a seat, it would be good if you could do so, because we now want to move on to our final keynote. I'm delighted that Brian Hogan has made the trip here from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Somebody who I have great faith in recommended Brian to us, and having looked at the title of the presentation, the one thing I'm absolutely sure about is it's going to be provocational. Certainly, it's going to do what the conference is set out to do, and that's to challenge. Brian is a research assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry at UNC. He got his PhD there in 2003. He's won 2 Tanner Awards for excellence in undergraduate teaching. He's won the Chemistry Department Teaching Award and the Center for Global Education Course Development Award. He's also won a Chapman Family Faculty Fellowship for Teaching Excellence. So he's got a very strong pedigree. He's also an Institute of Arts and Humanities Fellow and teaches honors courses both in biochemistry as well as science and society as an adjunct in the Honors College. His research focus includes the development of undergraduate biochemistry teaching and learning. And with that, I'll hand over to Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope I don't let Rob down, but I've been letting people down my whole life. So thank you for having me here. This is a really wonderful opportunity. I've enjoyed my time here in Glasgow greatly. So today, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit that's going on in American higher education. And the title of the truncated title is Hastening the Death of the Traditional College Lecture. And I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why. But first, I'm going to start with a story. So there's these 2 young goldfish, and they're swimming along in a fishbowl. They're chit-chatting with one another. And an older goldfish comes swimming the other way and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the 2 fish keep swimming along. And one fish looks at the other one and he says, "What the hell is water?" Think about that, because I'm going to get back to that. That's David Foster Wallace, by the way. Why should I change anything about my teaching? My lecture notes are great. They're yellowed. They've been around for 2.5 decades. My PowerPoints are great. They work really well, or maybe I still use overhead acetates. Why should I change anything? Why should I respond to some K through 12 educator who comes up with some nice rhyme that says, "You should no longer be the sage on the stage, but rather the guide on the side"? I don't need to do that because I'm already awesome. Look. No, don't clap. Because I'm going to show you that after 31 semesters of teaching biochemistry, the blah, 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 and Brian, you are the greatest hero in American educational history, that really doesn't apply. Okay, yeah, accolades are nice, but student learning is the real important thing here. So a little bit about the United States, and a quote from my mom, which is, on average, we're all average, but in our own special way. There's 2 Americas. There's America and then there's America, all right, where we're number 1, except for when we're not, okay? And this is where we're not even close to average by my mom's standards or anybody else's standards, and that's in science, math, and reading, where we rank 28th, 36th, and 25th in the world. That's not good. We're a nation of 330 million people, and we have 50 states. This is my state in the American Southeast, the state of North Carolina. And here are just some statistics on the state of North Carolina. It's big. You can fit about 2.5 Scotlands in here. If Scotland was to just decide to come and join the US, you would be the 38th in terms of size. You would be number 38. You'd beat out Maryland, which is fine. The state of North Carolina, where that star is right there, that's where Chapel Hill is, and we call that the Research Triangle Park. Now here's some gloomy statistics about the state of North Carolina. North Carolina, we rank 7th in infant mortality. That's the only time you want to be like 50th. We are 34th in poverty. We are 46th in teacher salary. We are 48th in per capita student spending in K through 12 education. This is not a good trend, people. And in our 100 counties, 63% of them live in poverty. All right. Some demographic data. These are not from the most recent census, but we are 70% white, about 20% African American, 1.2% Native American. We have 8 different tribal nations within the state of North Carolina alone. Our Latino population is over 500,000, and it's grown from 77,000 to over 500,000 just in 5 years. So these are some grim statistics, but in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship, the Research Triangle Park, which is made up of Duke, North Carolina, and NC State, UNC and NC State, and all of the biotech companies in that triangle, we rank 48th in the world in innovation economy. We're 10th in the United States. We need scientists because tobacco is gone. We don't grow tobacco that much in the state of North Carolina thanks to the changes in smoking legislation in the United States. We used to be a major textile manufacturer and producer. You could get a high school education and have a $10 an hour job. That's gone. Those jobs went to China. Furniture making, that was another big one in the state of North Carolina. Again, maybe you didn't even need a high school degree. Those jobs are now gone. The state of North Carolina, it hitched its cart to the biotech bandwagon. And what we need are scientists in a major way. Some of these statistics here might lead you to believe that we might be in trouble in grooming the next round of scientists. More bad news. These data come from the government, the National Center for Educational Statistics. For every 10 students who come into a university setting and they want to complete a STEM degree, science, technology, engineering, or math, only 4 of them will. Even worse is if you are an underrepresented minority group, which includes but not excluded to African Americans, Native Americans, and Latinos, if for every 10 students, 1.5 of you will finish your degree. This PCAST report that went to President Obama, right, this is the President's Council on Advisors of Science and Technology, they were screaming that we need 34% more graduates with STEM degrees in order for the US to remain competitive because manufacturing has gone. And the good news is that we have enough students enrolled in American universities to make up that 34%. So that's good, but how do we retain them? And why are students, I just showed you that 60% of our students are leaving the STEM fields. Why are they leaving in the first place? So part of this study was to give us some information about why. Well, there are a lot of reasons why. Failing a science class early on dooms your GPA. Lack of motivation and confidence. There are a lot of stereotypes that go along with I'm not the right skin color, or I'm not the type of person that does science. I'm a first-generation college student. Maybe that's not for me, all right? Financial aid takes a bit longer sometimes. Maybe instead of 8 semesters, it takes you 9 or 10 semesters to get through, so it costs you a bit more money. Inadequate academic advising. Just sheer numbers alone, we have 16,000 undergraduates at the University of North Carolina. For every 1 academic advisor that we have 600 students. That's a little difficult to do. There's perceived discrimination, and then there's negative experiences that are encountered in our gatekeeper introductory science and math courses. And as that relates to chemistry and biology, the 100 course numbers are our first year courses, 200s are sophomore, 300s are not shown, and 400s are our senior level courses. And the ones I'm going to be talking about are biology and chemistry. This is one that we can do something about. So I looked at the data, I said, wait a minute, at the University of North Carolina, we're ranked in the top 30 schools in the United States by US News and World Report. We're a top 15 or a top 10 chemistry department. There's got to be, these data can't apply to us because we're that good. And so I looked at our data, and this was 2003 to 2005, and I saw, if you look at these numbers here that are shaded, all right, males and females, those who wish to seek a STEM degree, 60%, 50%, that's a lot of people. And even when you break it down and you disaggregate the data a little bit, shown in purple are our underrepresented minority groups, we still have pretty high numbers of students. Look at our Asian numbers too, about 70% of students. They are a smaller group percentage-wise. We have a lot of people who want to do a STEM degree. So problem solved, Mr. President. I just solved it for you. Come to the University of North Carolina. But what we're finding is that the same problems that were found in that PCAS report, those national trends, also are perpetuated at my institution. Here is a grim breakdown of our 100, 200, and 400 level courses in chemistry. And these are your chances of earning a grade of C- or higher in general chemistry 1 and 2, organic chemistry 1 and 2, and our 400 level chemistry course, biochemistry. We have 3 levels of biochemistry, physical chemistry, so on and so forth. And you see that disproportionately, Asian and white students are doing pretty well in our 100 level courses. They're doing pretty well in our 200 level courses, and they're keeping pretty consistent in our 400 level courses. But as you go through the 100 level courses and the 200 level courses, you see disproportionately there are groups that are falling off very quickly, all right? And one of the groups, or 2 of the groups, are African Americans and Latinos. There's also Asian and Pacific Islanders, all right? These are Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. Those numbers decrease in our 100 to 200 level courses. Now there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. Hey, we're doing great at the 400 levels with these at-risk students or these underrepresented minority students, but I can name, by name, the number of underrepresented minority students that are at the 400 level in my department. So N is a very small number there. N is 2,800, 3,000. N here is half that. So we're losing 50% of our students early on, and disproportionately we're losing the very students that we need to retain. Hi, I'm the other Dr. Hogan. She would have been traveling here with me, but she decided that she would go give this very similar talk in California today. I'm serious. So she's enjoying the palm trees, and she's saying, if we just all get together here, people, come on now. She looked at the same report that I did, and it says that maybe the problem is in our introductory science courses. All right, and so we took a look at, we went through the Office of Institutional Research. They hold all of our numbers. Now, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but it's for a reason. It's because I'm a scientist. And I've always said you can't really know something until you put a number on it. In Egan's paper in 2011, negative experiences may include, this is like the disclaimer of the side effects of a pharmaceutical drug. Negative experiences may include large class sizes. Check, we've got that at UNC. Passive learning techniques, lack of direct contact with faculty, language barriers, faculty being perceived as valuing research over teaching, courses designed to be weed out or to get rid of those who are weak in the evolutionary intellectual scale of things. Okay. So can one person make a change? That's the question. Can we just push this change button and suddenly undo the damage that we have been doing or that is perceived to have been done? This leads me to metacognition, which is how we know what we know. So here was me not too long ago, where I just said, these students are the problem. My lecture notes, I've been using the same lecture notes and I've been winning all these awards, and these students just aren't getting it. Lousy kids with the cell phones today and the Twitter, you know, what is it? And then I realized, hold on, why do I teach the way I teach? Well, it's because that's the way I was taught. What assumptions do I hold about students? I'm assuming too much about what students know and what students don't know. Have I really analyzed how my students think? What content should I teach? Do I really have to cover every single bullet point in chapters 1 through 9 in general chemistry? Do I really need to cover for non-science majors selected reactions of the transition metals in chapter 7? That's you answer that for yourself, okay? How do I know if my students are learning? What evidence do I have? Put a number on it. I can't do it until I start to ask questions. Here's a question that we ask students. There's a lot of words up here. Words, words, words. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to tell you what the words mean, okay? We ask students, it's students versus bar graph. Ready? We ask students a fairly simple question for us as scientists. We should all be able to answer this. You got two groups of people, you got 59 patients, and they're given two different concentrations of a statin drug, 80 milligrams versus 10 milligrams. And what you see over the course of a few weeks is that people are taking the higher doses, see a big reduction in gum inflammation, and they also see a decrease in atherosclerosis. And those who are on the lower dosage, well, they see similar effects, but it's dosage dependent. So we asked our students, draw me the graph of what this looks like. And using a technology package which is called Learning Catalytics, students can draw on an iPad or any tablet or something like that. And these are, out of 301 responses, these are some of the data that we got. My assumption was that everyone would have nailed this in terms of bar graphs. That student did not, nor did that one. Doing better down here. But these are empirical pieces of data that are floating around me that I can now use. My assumption was that all students know how to draw bar graphs, and they know how to take information from a dense paragraph, and they know how to turn it into something that looks like something that's scientifically useful, maybe for a lab report, right? So now at least we have some measurement tools. Here are some of my evaluations. He's entertaining. I usually teach at 8 a.m. and I'm really fired up at 8 a.m. But the exams are impossible. He's a funny guy, but his tests are too hard. Tests are ridiculous. Kiss your future goodbye. I'm solely responsible for killing the careers of hundreds of thousands of students who wish to go to medical school because they got a C in biochemistry. And this was a dig at me, but I actually love this one. He wants you to apply what you learned to made-up situations. Imagine that, applying what you have learned, okay? Ridiculously hard. So what does this tell? I mean, if I brought these into you, what would you tell me to do? I mean, would you tell me to be less funny or write exams that aren't that hard? So what I realized was this, that here are my expectations. I was thinking up here at the very top of Bloom's taxonomy, I'm thinking way up here. Knowledge and comprehension, application, analyses, that's where I am. And what we have are mismatched expectations between instructor and student. Students have all the high school skills they need. They know how to highlight like it's nobody's business, okay? I have actually a few slides at the end if you'd like to see them I had to take pictures of students of highlighting. But we have these mismatched expectations. So, and certain groups are going to be disproportionately affected. I said that 63 of our 100 counties have poverty averages that are below the national poverty line. You can only imagine how good those public schools are. In America, schools are funded by taxpayers, by the local tax base. By state constitution, the University of North Carolina has to take 82% of its students from the state of North Carolina, and we have to take at least one student from every county. So apples and oranges, people. The valedictorian in one county may not be the same as the valedictorian in another county. All right, so there's going to be this disproportionate preparation and also mismatched expectations. So look at this list here. How do you learn best? Now, if I knew what technology was going to be in this room, I would have prepared learning catalytics or poll everywhere so that you could answer these questions. But you can just jot them down on a piece of paper or just look at them in your head and think to yourself, how do I learn? Of these, what's the way that you learn best? And so we asked this question a few weeks ago at another teaching conference, and people got to give their feedback live, and here are the data. It was a teaching conference, so everyone said teaching, of course, but practicing, discussing, blah, 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 listening to a lecture. That was at the bottom. Well, if teachers feel this way, what do you think our students feel? So how do we fix this problem where we have mismatched expectations between where the instructor is and where the student is? And the idea is practice. We have to practice together in order to bring their level up, but I'm not bringing my level down. So this comes through in-class homework, having students teach each other, doing calculations together, interpreting data, maybe even reading primary literature, doing things outside of the classroom that maybe we used to do inside the classroom, and then doing some things in the classroom that we used to do outside of the classroom. I'm not saying that there's no place for lecture, I'm just saying that use it judiciously. Well, these data, again, these are the D's and F's in our big intro courses. Again, these come from the Office of Institutional Research at UNC. And here's my contribution to the problem, the chemistry department. And I was tired of this insanity. One definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and again and hoping that you get a different outcome. here's our D and Fs for our gateway courses, holding tight around 16, 17%. If you look at our underrepresented minority groups, diversity is a big thing with me. I study retention of Latino students in the STEM fields, hence there's this big spin on diversity here. You notice that Latino and Hispanics of all different kinds are disproportionately affected in terms of Ds and Fs. If you just look at the data for African Americans compared to white Ds and Fs, the numbers are quite striking. The Hispanic data are similar. This really got my attention. And I remember saying to my wife around the dinner table, and I talk very openly about matters of race and socioeconomics. I have an interracial family. My daughter is adopted from Guatemala. All right, I've been to Central America. I've built schools there in jungles. This is unacceptable to me that we keep giving, I said to my wife, this is unacceptable to me that we keep giving out Ds and Fs disproportionately to people of color. We got to do something. But what we wanted to do was, well, if it's not, how can we change teaching so that we level the playing field, not just for those students of color or the underrepresented students? How can we increase learning for all students? Everybody, inclusive excellence and diversity. How can we do that for everybody, but not lower our expectations? I mean, one way is to just drop the bar and make the test a lot easier, but nobody ever rises to lower expectations, right? So we went about a bit of a course design, and there's a traditional structure, a low structure course, which is shown by this top arrow, which we're probably all pretty familiar with. Students can either read or not read, come to class or not come to class. They're adults. And they can either do their homework or not do their homework. Then there's a very high structure classroom where the students are assigned questions or videos or readings which are held accounted for in advance. Then more than 50% of the class time is you're responsible for actually doing. Students are working together, or they're working individually and then working together to solve problems, to interact and discuss, and students are constantly assessed. Up here, there's no assessment. Down here, there's assessment. I had the opportunity to teach general chemistry the following semester after I was looking at these data, and I said, well, I'm kind of a moderate guy. I wouldn't want to go too high structure, so I went with I tried to make a change. And I used a problem-based learning format. And for those of you who are chemists in the room, I said, okay, this third of the room, for example, this 1/3 of the room, what you are going to do here, you've got a given number of molecules. I want you to figure out how many grams of this compound we have. And you have this many moles. I want you to figure out how many grams we have. And you have to use combustion analysis to figure out how many grams we have. And the number of grams is the same. And it's a way of figuring out, getting students to see that there's multiple ways to get at the right answer. Now, this is just one data point. Here, what I have, here's me, okay, and here are all my buddies teaching general chemistry. And look at how many A's. I said, if you can do this, if you can get 90 to 100 on these exams, then you will get an A. If you can get 80 to 90, then you will get a B. And we use a particular book that comes along with a test bank that has some questions. I can't say that we all asked the exact same questions, but they were all very similar questions. There's only so many ways you can ask people to convert grams to moles, people. But nevertheless, you see that I gave out a lot of A's, and I'm proud of that. And I gave out a lot of B's, and certainly a lot, but look at my D's and F's. They're way low. One of my other colleagues where's Todd? Here's Todd. He's pretty low. He gives out a bit more D's, a bit more F's, but he also has some pretty good numbers here in terms of A's, B's, and C's. Some of these people up here, holy cow, 18% D, 10% F's. I would exit STEM in a hurry. In fact, I'd probably leave the university and never come back. This is just a simple data point. I made a change. I decided that I was going to change the structure of my course, and I got a result. And now I have numbers, and I can start to do things with these numbers. Enter Scott Freeman. Scott Freeman is at the University of Washington in Seattle. And the University of Washington, we have a Washington University in St. Louis. It gets very complicated. So the University of Washington begins with a W, and we just call it UW. So Scott Freeman's at UW, and he's an author of a textbook, and he is the leader in biology education and higher education. And he did a meta-analysis of 225 studies that reported data on exam scores or failure rates when comparing student performances in undergraduate STEM courses using traditional lecture-based format versus active learning. And what he came up with was this. If there are any questions about the statistics, please feel free to ask the statistician that put them together. It wasn't me. But they did see a difference in concept inventories using equivalent exams, and it had a weighted standard mean difference of this value. What does that mean, people? If this was in K through 12 education, it would lead to a policy change if we saw that kind of number in the United States. The average risk was 0.64, and the p-value for the odds ratio was this number. If you were trying out a new drug on a group of people, there's a really good chance that you would stop the trial at that point. And this is where Scott Freeman in this paper is impressed in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. And I love how he coins the term, continuing traditional lecturing is educational malpractice. Wow. That guy throws a heavy right, man. All right. That's a big deal. He also published a paper in Science, which I hear is a pretty good journal. And he showed that increased structure and active learning reduces the achievement gap, right, the disparity between underrepresented minorities and socioeconomically disadvantaged students versus traditional college students in introductory biology courses. And I thought, well, can I use this in my 400 level biochemistry course and see if there are any changes that I can measure? So what I did was I went with my wife's golden rule, which was ask but don't tell. Instead of telling people what the coefficient is in front of when balancing, I'm gonna just zip it. All right, we're gonna ask, and I'm gonna ask questions, and then I'm gonna get data back. This was a pilot that I began in my honors sections of my class. I did away with memorization. Students in my class no longer have to memorize the amino acids, the 3-letter code, and the 1-letter code. When I told some of my faculty friends that, a few of them passed out. I mean, that's sacrilege, right? We all had to do that. But this began to reveal some ingrained misconceptions that students had about just basic chemistry and thermodynamics in particular. And then what I was going to do was compile these data on performance using multiple assessment methods. So using Poll Everywhere, different ways of collecting data on students and whether they know what they know and what they don't know. So this is Michaelis-Menten kinetics. And for those of you who love kinetics, you're, yeah, it's going to do it. For years and years, I would just derive the Michaelis-Menten equation, and I thought, I'd put the chalk down at the end of class and say, this was the greatest lecture I've ever given. I derived the heck out of that equation. But what I did was I said, all right, students, here we had talked a bit about enzymology, and I said, here are the rate equations for the formation of the enzyme substrate complex and the rate of breakdown. And here, Michaelis and Menton made an assumption, and it's called the steady state assumption. And it says once the reaction gets started, the concentration of the enzyme substrate complex will remain constant. And instead of then going on and deriving the equation and telling them, what I said was, now what I want you to do is show me what this steady state assumption means, both mathematically, all right, so take those three rate equations and do some algebra with them. And I also want you to draw me a picture, an XY graph, and on the x-axis we're going to have reaction progress, and on the y-axis we're going to have substrates, products, and enzyme substrate. And I said, you got about 3 minutes. And I had 10 groups of 3. And I've done this every year for 3 straight years. For 3 straight years, not one group has gotten both questions right. Conclusion, 31 semesters of me telling funny jokes and deriving the Michaelis-Menten equation was not really teaching my students. It was not helping my students understand this fundamental biochemical principle. That's my, on average, we're all average. I'm pretty average in art. That was the best that I could possibly do. Ask students, don't tell them. So then I got more engaged with technology. This is a poll everywhere question. Every biochemistry class in the United States, we always cover hemoglobin and oxygen binding. It's just the gold standard. And we always look at XY graphs where you have percent of molecules saturated on the Y versus the concentration of ligand or oxygen on the x-axis. And so I asked my students a question. I said, imagine, I like to make things up, and students don't like that. And I said, imagine you have hemoglobin Q. Hemoglobin has 4 binding sites. I said, imagine hemoglobin Q has 8, okay? And we're going to make a graph that looks very similar to these saturation curves that we've been doing. And it's going to be sigmoidal. But instead of having theta, or fraction of molecules on our y-axis, what I want you to do is change that axis to moles of oxygen bound. And then I want you to choose one of these answers. And I'm just going to cut right to the chase. All right, hemoglobin should be able to bind 4 moles of oxygen because there's 4 oxygen binding sites. And my new imagined one should be able to bind 8. None of these answers are correct. And only 24% of my students were brave enough to say, they're not right, Dr. Hogan. 50% of them went with what they thought they knew. Well, this is the closest one. And so here I got at a common misconception, which is students, well, my take on it was that when students are confronted with something that they don't know, where I haven't helped prepare them, that mismatch, they're just going to go with what they know. They're going to fall back on those high school study skills and say, I know hemoglobin binds 4 oxygens, the answer must be 4. Another piece of data. This is a study that has even more data. We decided that we were going to be very scientific in teaching and use evidence-based methods to see if we could improve student learning outcomes. And in this case, we were going back to Scott Freeman's work, looking at introductory level biology classes. And we needed a guinea pig for this. And luckily, my wife teaches introductory biology, and she teaches it every semester as an enrollment of 400 students. And so here's how we crafted things. Dr. Kelly was the only instructor. She was going to have similar exams. They were analyzed by a third party and bloomed. The grading scheme was going to be the same. The only thing that was going to be different was going to be the structure of the course. It was going to be a medium to high structure course, and the students were going to be different. But when they did the statistics out in the University of Washington, they were able to control for that. These data were funded by an NSF grant. Thank you, National Science Foundation. This was Sarah Eddy at UW. She's the statistician. And a Lenovo grant that paid a whopping $2,500 to my wife to redesign this course. But look at the bang you get for $2,500, Lenovo. Good on you. So can we transfer a successful intervention from one institution to another? The University of Washington had done this. Scott Freeman had published it in Science. Can we do it at the University of North Carolina? Well, will performance for all students increase, and will failure rates decrease for all? Inclusive excellence. We want everybody to do better. All students increased in terms of percentage points in their final grade at the end of this study, somewhere between 3.2 and 3.7%. These are similar with the Hawk study, which was the science paper that was published by Scott Freeman. And you see a reduction in failure rates. You see they saw about a 30% reduction in failure rates, and we saw a 41% reduction in failure rates when you compare traditional lecture, which is shaded in the dark blue, to the higher structure course, which is shown in Carolina blue. Uh-oh. There we go. So check and check. All students did better, and some students actually did better than others. So did we actually close that achievement gap? The answer is yes. Remember that all students did better. Race, ethnicity, parents, income. First generation college students saw a 6.1% increase in their learning outcome. African American students saw a 6.3% increase. And Latino and Latina students, they had a similar increase of 3.2 to 3.7%. So everybody won. We raised all boats. The tests were the same. We didn't lower our expectations. So do students from diverse groups respond differently? Yes. i.e., we decreased the achievement gap, particularly most pronounced for African American students, but all students did better. And first generation students also benefited greatly. Then, on top of this, we did an attitude survey, which asked students questions about how they felt about this gateway course and about their level of participation in this high structure course. And here's a bit of example data. So here's an important behavior change for black students in class. Under a low structure class, black students were 2.3 times more likely to report a lower level of in-class participation than students of other ethnicities. And under a high structure or medium structure course, the difference in participation goes away. Remember that table I showed you with the D and F rates for African American students? Participation is so key to getting students to feel like they are part of a community. Data not shown, students feel like they're part of a community under this high structure course. There was something important that I was going to say here that, retention of African American males is something that is of great importance in the United States. We spend a lot of time looking at it. I'm from the American South, all right, and we have a long history. I'm not going to give it to you right now, but we didn't desegregate our universities until the Civil Rights Act when Lyndon Johnson was president. So some of the vestiges of racism and disparity still live on in the American South. That's why we pay so much attention. Of the 4,000 incoming students for this year's class, we have 98 African American males. That's it. 98. Those data are unacceptable to me, in my humble opinion, because that's on tape. So what started off as one summer stipend of $2,500 to my wife to restructure a course. Thank you very much, Lenovo. A good plan for evaluation, working across the nation with UW, and a lot of reflection and many hours of restructuring courses. We got this huge return, this huge bang for our buck, because we saw these huge learning differences, these huge increases for all students. And these are similar to interventions that have gone on in all different places in the United States where they've put in higher structure courses. We're falling right in line with them for a very small amount of money. Now what we have done with a $2,500 grant from Lenovo was parlay that into an apprenticeship program thanks to the AAU, which is the American Association of Universities. This was a $1 million grant given to UNC and 7 other institutions to begin an apprenticeship program whereby different faculty members that use different methodologies for teaching will take another faculty member kind of under their wing, really just right next to them, and help them facilitate change in their classroom. And this mentorship kind of buys out the time of a research faculty member, takes a little bit off of their teaching load, and so it works out well for everybody. It also, this investment of $2,500 has come back to us in spades because the Department of Physics, the Department of Math, Chemistry, and Biology were suddenly each granted 2 new teaching faculty positions. They were just, here you go. You now have them. Keep doing this. So one thing I was mentioning before, I say to my students is, I say, this is America. You can do whatever the hell you want within certain constitutional limits, and I'm sure something similar goes on here in Scotland. But just think about the way that you teach, if any of this seems reasonable to you. Be scientific about how you teach. Use evidence. You would never make a claim without any data. You have to be able to collect data, and it's all around you, everybody. Bits and pieces, attitude, whatever data you can start with, A's, B's, D's, and F's, you just collect it. Attitudes towards how students feel about it, yep. Start writing it down and start collecting the data, because people can't argue with your numbers. They can argue with your interpretation of your numbers, but they can't argue with your numbers, because numbers are numbers and they are real. Revise and assess depending on how you feel most comfortable teaching your class. Not everybody's an extrovert. Some people are introverts. You do whatever suits you best and whatever you find suits you very well. And then what I'd like you to think about is what evidence, are you going to seek out now that's going to help you really know if your students are learning? What type of assessment can you put together? And shown here is a picture of me, and these are all girls that got the opportunity to go to middle school because we built them a school. I asked them, how can you learn better? And they said, Dr. Bryan, we need a school. So we built a school in the jungle. Now they get to go to middle school. Back to the 2 fish. What the hell is water? So David Foster Wallace, this was a commencement speech he gave at Mount Holyoke College, and you don't have to read it because I'm going to read it to you. He said, he was talking about the purpose of a true liberal arts education, and he said, the only thing that I know to be the capital T truth is that you get to decide how you perceive your world. This, I submit, is the freedom of a real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That is real freedom. That is being educated, understanding how to think. The capital T truth is not about life after death. It's about life before death. It's about the real value of a real education that has almost nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with simple awareness. Awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over. This is water. This is water. your students are the water. What they say are the water. The measurements you take are the water. They're there for you people. You just have to grab them, hold on to them, and learn from them. I'd like to thank the following people, particularly Rob Aiken, who may want to run out of the room at this point, Vicki Gunn, Heather Keating, and everybody here who's been so nice to me here at the University of Glasgow. And these are all the people who helped on the UNC side. I mentioned the folks at UW, but of course my wife, Dr. Vijay Sathi, Jeremy Petrenka, Jeannie Loeb, Jennifer Crumper, she provided one of the slides there on retention data, Dr. Mike Crimmins, who's also in my department, and Professor Carrie Beth Bleem, who has taught probably more students than I will ever teach in my entire life. The UNC Center for Faculty Excellence, which has given out course development grants. And I personally need to thank the Thorpe Faculty Engaged Scholars Program through the Center for Public Service for giving me some funding to go out and do the research, to do the outreach research that I do, and also for helping to fund this study. I thank you I know I'm between you and the wine, so I thank you for your time.
Okay, so we have time for a few questions. Questions? And there is a roving mic in the middle of the room with Amanda. Amanda.
It's more of a challenge than a question. So your talk was the death of the lecture, but I would argue there's still some place for a standard lecture, but not on its own. And the reason I say that is because in many of the courses I teach, I have a mixture of SDL, PBL, interactive sessions, but there's some lectures, some standard lectures. And every feedback questionnaire I give to the students at the end of every course, and I ask, do you want to keep the SDLs, the PBLs, the standard lectures? They all say, don't get rid of the standard lectures, because they like them for two reasons. One, either to set up the information for a discussion session, or at the end, to reaffirm the things that they've learnt by interactive sessions. So I would argue that there is still a place for a standard lecture, but as a mixture of different formats and not as a pure, old lecture on its own.
I absolutely 100% disagree. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It's towards the end of the day. It's really late my time, and in fact, I agree with you wholeheartedly that there is now none of these things are working. We asked our students the very same question: how do you want to be taught? And we had up there 100% lecture. Well, some students still want lecture. They also want a variety of different things. There is a place for lecture. I'm not saying, what I should say is the old sort of rock on slate kind of lecture where you walk in wearing a cloak and you just write on the board and then you walk on out. And very much to your point, using lecture but changing it up with an activity or problem-based learning exercise or any other learning technique, anything that you can do in the United States, the attention span of the average college student is 7 minutes now. So every 7 to 10 minutes, we endeavor to change. So I'm not saying that we should do away with all lecture. I was trying to be bombastic so I could get invited. But I wholeheartedly agree with you that there is a place, because there has to be a little bit.
Okay, Jill.
Thanks very much for your talk, Brian. I really enjoyed it. I'm very much a convert to active methods of learning and have been for over 20 years. But I can't say that's the same for all of my colleagues. And I just wondered if you had managed to convert all of the other members of faculty in your department, and if so, how you managed to get them all on side.
There's some that are never going to change, and they've made that explicitly clear. And that's fine. They can go on and teach A few of, they call themselves the dinosaurs and we're not going to change. And they said, but that's fine, we're going to retire soon. The other incentive is money. This AAU grant that we have is a big incentive because it buys out part of your teaching load. And if you want somebody to try something new, you have to, at least in America, you have to incentivize them. And we're not, particularly our research faculty who are running humongous labs and bringing in millions of dollars in research grants, to ask them to now go ahead and try and, we need you to restructure your entire course. They don't have the time to do it. So by giving them some teaching relief and working alongside the teaching faculty, that's been the way that we've been able to recruit many, many faculty, some who I never thought would ever come over. Mike Crimmins is a world-renowned organic chemist, and as soon as he saw some of these data, he said, I want to do that. And he has now made over 80 videos of him talking about carbon making 4 bonds. I mean, it's been amazing, but some just won't do it. But I think there's a real push.
Okay, other questions? Or is the lure of wine too much? Okay, well, Brian is going to hang around for the reception, so I think if there are any more questions, you can obviously approach Brian directly. But for now, Brian, thank you very much for a very thought-provoking presentation. Okay, so now it really is only me between you and the wine. And I kind of heard a bit of noise at the back, which suggests it might be behind me. So if there's a stampede, I'm in serious trouble. I'm going to keep this very brief. I've really enjoyed today. I thought we had a great keynote to kick us off. We've had a great keynote to finish the conference. But actually the stuff in between, certainly the things I've seen have been absolutely superb. To give you a sense of my day, and everybody will have a different day in terms of what they did, after the first keynote, I started with a session which was looking at the use of Twitter amongst other techniques within a teaching environment. And it was a very thoughtful consideration of how that could be done, how it is being done, but also what the implications of that are for student learning and for the academic as well. And then I moved on and looked at a first-year research project in psychology and some of the challenges around embedding that effectively, some of the ways in which the students were engaging with that, the challenges they were throwing back as part of that process, and a consideration within that of how it should sit within the assessment scheme of the course that it was being taught within. Then there was lunch, and then after lunch I went to a presentation that looked at the use of language and how influential the use of language can be in science in terms of student comprehension and student engagement with the material. It also looked at, in the second part of the presentation, about how we can overcome misconceptions that if we don't address can stay with the student and can hinder the development of the student as they go through their course. Then moved on to partial mookification, if there is such a word as mookification. There is a word, partial, incidentally. I almost said the wrong thing there. And again, that was looking at how we could learn some lessons from the MOOC space, maybe bring some of the techniques that are being used in the MOOC space into credit-bearing provision. And that's something, of course, that we have a particular interest in as we begin to experiment with MOOCs. We want to understand what the opportunities are there and to do that more widely in the university. And just as a plug, our first MOOC on Future Learn does start on the 19th of May. It's Cancer in the 21st Century, and I would very much encourage you to take part in it, but also to make people aware of it and get them engaged in it. We want to learn as much from this as we possibly can. And our MOOC in law is running later in the summer, and again, the same applies to that one. And the final one I went to was around the use of portfolios and peer reviews in the classics. And that stimulated quite an interesting discussion at the end around how these can fit within assessment structures. So I had a great time. I really loved it. And I thought that the presenters made a real effort to engage the audiences. Many of the presenters put questions up at the end to really stimulate the discussion, and they didn't put the questions up only to do that. They genuinely wanted to hear the views of the audience in relation to these questions to help them develop their thinking. So I think it's been a great event, and I think the organisation this year has been fabulous. Now, I was joking to somebody that I got an email last week which had the nicest intent, but it was actually quite a backhanded comment, and I almost made one in relation to the organising team here. But let me tell you, I'm not going to do that. They were brilliant, absolutely, from start to finish. They were brilliant. The team in the Learning and Teaching Centre that pulled this event together, that arranged all the logistics of the event, have done a terrific job, and I think some of them will probably be around or be able to hear us, so why don't we give them a round of applause for that? I'd also like to thank those that volunteered or were coerced. Somebody used the term in one of the presentations this afternoon that he had slaves that worked for him. Let me just reassure you, there are no slaves in the University of Glasgow. And also, I think in the same presentation, he referred to students dying as a consequence of the teaching methods. No students have died in the preparation of any of the presentations for the conference today, so let me just reassure you on that one. But the session chairs held the sessions to time. It allowed people to make the transitions between the different presentations, and that all helps to make the conference run smoothly. The catering staff have been great as well. I mean, the catering for the conference has been very good. It's been, actually, I think it's been the best that we've had. So I hope, all in all, that like me, you'll leave the event today enthused, but you won't let that enthusiasm sort of burn for a bit and then kind of burn out. Make the connections. You've heard a lot of people. You've seen a very engaging program. Make the connections across the institution and with colleagues outside of the institution that are here today. Work on those connections. Use them to develop your practice. Let's work across the disciplines, and let's get change into the environment, but change that produces positive outcomes. So thank you all for your participation, and please now stay around and enjoy the wine. Thank you.